The blazing Montana sun bore witness to the most degrading moment of Lillian Harrow's life as she stood on the auction block, her 4-year-old daughter Emma clutching her skirts, both of them trembling despite the summer heat of 1875. "$500 for the woman," shouted the auctioneer, his voice carrying across the dusty square of Silver Creek. "Young, healthy, can cook and clean, and 50 for the little one sold separately." Lillian's heart plummeted. After her husband's death from cholera 3 months ago, the bank had seized their small farm, claiming unpaid debts she'd known nothing about. With no family and nowhere to turn, she'd been forced into indentured servitude to cover the remaining debts. But she never imagined they'd separate her from Emma. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking, "please don't take my daughter from me, she's all I have." The auctioneer ignored her pleas. "Do I hear $550 for the woman? Fine specimen, not yet 25. Lillian scanned the crowd desperately. Mostly men, ranch owners, miners, shopkeepers looking for cheap labor, some women too, seeking household help, but the cold calculation in their eyes told her none cared about keeping mother and child together. "600, called a voice from the back. "650, countered another. Tears streamed down Lillian's face as Emma whimpered, sensing her mother's distress. The bidding continued, her price rising while her dignity plummeted. When it reached $800, the auctioneer seemed satisfied. "Sold to Mr. Thompson for $800. He pointed to a red-faced man Lillian recognized as the owner of the town's largest saloon. The leering smile he gave her made her blood run cold. "Now, for the child." "Starting at 50, they stay together," came a deep voice from the side of the crowd. The gathering parted as a tall figure stepped forward. Dusty boots, worn denim, a cotton shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows revealing sun-bronzed forearms. A leather vest and wide-brimmed hat completed the silhouette of the man now standing before the auction block. "I'll take them both," he stated simply. The auctioneer frowned. "Mr. Jameson, they're being sold separately." "You can bid on the child if 900 for both," the cowboy interrupted, his green eyes steady beneath the shadow of his hat. "Mother and daughter stay together." Thompson scowled. "Now see here, Jameson, 1,000, the cowboy continued, as if Thompson hadn't spoken. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. $1,000 bids were rare in Silver Creek. "Ain't worth it, Garrett," someone called out. Lillian clutched Emma closer, hardly daring to hope as she studied the man called Garrett Jameson. Tall and broad-shouldered, maybe 30 years old, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. His expression revealed nothing, but something in those green eyes spoke of determination. Thompson hesitated, then spat in the dust. "Take him. Saloon girls are cheaper anyway." The auctioneer glanced between Thompson and Garrett before bringing down his gavel. "Sold to Garrett Jameson for $1,000 both the woman and child." As Garrett approached the auction block, Lillian pulled Emma behind her skirts protectively. What kind of man spent such a sum? "And for what purpose, madam?" Garrett said, extending a calloused hand to help her down from the platform. "My wagon's over there. I'll take you to my ranch now if you're ready." "What do you want from us?" Lillian whispered, not moving. Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps understanding. "Just help at my ranch, you'll have your own cabin. The child stays with you." Relief flooded her, but suspicion remained. Men didn't spend small fortunes out of kindness. Still, any alternative seemed better than Thompson's saloon. "Thank you, Mr. Jameson," she said softly, taking his hand and stepping down. "Garrett," he corrected, leading them toward a wagon loaded with supplies. "Just Garrett." As he helped them onto the wagon seat, Emma peered up at him with wide blue eyes. "Are you going to be our new papa?" Garrett froze, then busied himself with the reins. "No, little one, I'm just giving you and your mama a place to stay." The wagon pulled away from town, and Lillian watched Silver Creek recede into the distance, wondering what future awaited them at the ranch of the mysterious Garrett Jameson. The journey to Garrett's ranch took nearly 2 hours, winding through golden valleys and ascending into pine-forested foothills. They traveled mostly in silence, broken only by Emma's occasional questions about animals they spotted along the way. "Mr. Garrett, do you have horses?" she asked, her earlier fear replaced by childish curiosity. "Several," he replied, "including a gentle mare that might let you ride her someday if your mama approves." Lillian observed him carefully. He seemed uncomfortable with conversation, answering Emma's questions directly but offering no elaboration. His profile remained stoic, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "Mr. Jameson," Lillian ventured, "I want to thank you again for what you did, but I need to understand what you expect from us." He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the trail. "Ranch needs tending, house needs keeping. Previous housekeeper left last month to marry, been managing alone, but it's not working well." His words came out clipped as if conversation cost him effort. "And Emma?" "Children belong with their mothers," he said simply. Something in his tone suggested personal experience, but Lillian didn't press. Instead, she asked, $1,000 seems excessive for a housekeeper." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Money's not an issue." "What Thompson had planned for you," he cut himself off with a glance at Emma. "No woman deserves that fate." Before Lillian could respond, the wagon crested a hill, revealing a sprawling ranch nestled in a verdant valley. A two-story white farmhouse stood as its centerpiece, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. "Pine Creek Ranch," Garrett announced. "Been in my family 3 generations." As they approached, Lillian noticed a bunkhouse where several ranch hands paused their activities to watch the wagon arrive. A large garden sat neglected beside the main house, its beds overgrown with weeds among vegetables gone wild. Garrett pulled the wagon to a stop before a small cabin about 50 yards from the main house. "This will be yours. It's simple but sound." The cabin was indeed basic, a single room with a stone fireplace, small table with chairs, and a bed in the corner. A curtained area presumably concealed washing space, and shelves lined one wall. "There's a root cellar beneath," Garrett explained as he carried in their meager belongings a single trunk that contained all that remained of their former life. "Wood stacked outside, outhouse is behind. Main house has a pump kitchen for bathing on Saturdays." Lillian ran her hand over the rough wooden table, noting the cabin was dusty but solid. "When do I begin my duties?" "Tomorrow's soon enough. Get settled tonight." He hesitated at the door. "You'll take breakfast and dinner at the main house with me. Midday meal too, if you're not busy elsewhere. I eat at dawn and dusk." "And what exactly will my duties include?" "Cooking, cleaning, mending. Garden needs revival if you've the skill." He shifted uncomfortably. "Pay is $20 monthly plus room and board for both of you." "Fair," Lillian blinked in surprise. Not only was he providing shelter for both her and Emma, but he was offering wages as well. "More than fair," she managed. Garrett nodded. "I'll send someone with food and fresh water for tonight." He tipped his hat and turned to leave. "Mr. Jameson," Lillian called after him. "You spent $1,000 today. Will that be deducted from my wages?" He paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't read. "No, madam." "That debt's settled." Then he was gone, striding back toward the main house. Emma tugged at Lillian's skirt. "Mama, I'm hungry." "Soon, sweetheart." Lillian knelt beside her daughter, smoothing her blonde curls. "Mr. Jameson is sending food. I like him," Emma declared. "He has kind eyes." Lillian wasn't sure about kind, but there was something honest in Garrett Jameson's gaze, something that made her think perhaps, just perhaps, they might find safety here. True to his word, a ranch hand arrived 30 minutes later with a basket containing bread, cheese, dried beef, and apples, along with a pitcher of fresh milk. He introduced himself as Daniel, tipped his hat respectfully, and left without lingering. After they ate, Lillian unpacked their trunk while Emma explored the small cabin. Night fell quickly, and with it came a silence Lillian had nearly forgotten existed. No town noises, just distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of pine trees in the breeze. As she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked, "Are we staying here forever, Mama?" Lillian kissed her forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're together, and that's what matters most." Long after Emma fell asleep, Lillian sat by the window, watching the lights in the main house go dark. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with the strength she'd found today, the strength to survive for her daughter's sake. Dawn came early at Pine Creek Ranch. Lillian woke to roosters crowing and the distant sounds of men readying for the day's work. She dressed quickly in her second-best dress, saving her best for Sundays, and roused Emma. "Remember your manners today," she instructed as she buttoned Emma's dress and braided her hair. "Mr. Jameson has been kind to us." The main house loomed larger as they approached, its white clapboard siding glowing pink in the early light. Lillian hesitated at the back door, then knocked tentatively. "It's open," came Garrett's voice from within. The kitchen was spacious but Spartan, a large cast iron stove, wooden work table, cupboards, and a sturdy table where Garrett sat drinking coffee, already dressed for the day's work. He stood awkwardly when they entered. "Morning," he said, gesturing toward the stove. "Coffee's hot." "Eggs and bacon in the pantry." Lillian noticed the kitchen showed signs of bachelor living, functional but lacking organization, with a stack of unwashed dishes beside a deep sink. "Please sit," she said, hanging her shawl on a peg. "I'll prepare breakfast." While Emma sat quietly at the table, Lillian quickly assessed the kitchen's contents, finding everything needed to make a proper meal. Soon, she had eggs frying, bacon sizzling, and biscuits in the oven. She worked efficiently, aware of Garrett watching her movements while pretending to focus on his coffee. When she set plates before them, Emma remembered her manners and thanked her politely. Garrett seemed surprised at the child's good behavior. "She's well raised," he commented, nodding approvingly. "Her father and I taught her respect," Lillian replied, joining them with her own plate. Garrett's expression shifted at the mention of her husband. "Your husband, he passed recently, 3 months ago, cholera." Lillian kept her voice steady, though the pain remained fresh. "We had a small farm near Carson City. After Thomas died, I learned he'd mortgaged everything to expand our operations. The bank took it all." "I'm sorry," Garrett said, and sounded genuinely so. "Mama says Papa's watching us from heaven," Emma contributed, then asked Garrett, "Do you have a wife?" "Emma," Lillian admonished. "No," Garrett answered, his lips quirking slightly at the child's directness. "No wife." "After breakfast," Lillian said, changing the subject, "perhaps you could show me around the house so I understand what needs doing." The tour revealed a home sorely in need of a woman's touch. The ground floor contained a formal parlor, dining room, study, and the large kitchen with attached pantry. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, Garrett's, 2 spares, and one that had clearly belonged to a woman once but now stood empty, its surfaces collecting dust. "My mother's room," Garrett explained briefly. "She passed 2 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss," Lillian said softly, "and your father died in '68. War injuries never properly healed." He moved on quickly, showing her the linen closet and explaining which ranch hands ate at the bunkhouse, and which the foreman and 2 senior hands took meals at the main house. By mid-morning, Lillian had formed a plan of attack. She sent Emma to play in the shade of a large oak where she could watch her while tackling the kitchen first. By noon, when the men came in for dinner, the midday meal, she had prepared a hearty stew and fresh bread. The foreman, Walter, a graying man with kind eyes, seemed especially appreciative of the home-cooked food. "Miss Lillian, this is the finest meal I've had since Mrs. Peterson left. The boss was smart to bring you on." Lillian noticed Garrett didn't correct the assumption that he'd simply hired her rather than explaining the auction. She was grateful for that small mercy. Over the following days, a routine developed. Lillian rose early to prepare breakfast, spent mornings cleaning and organizing the house, afternoons tending the revived garden or doing laundry, and evenings preparing dinner. Emma followed her about, helping with small tasks or playing nearby. The ranch hands treated her with respect, tipping their hats and thanking her for meals. Some brought Emma small treasures, a pretty stone, a carved wooden horse, a ribbon for her hair. She blossomed under the attention, her natural cheerfulness returning after the trauma of recent months. Garrett remained an enigma. He worked from dawn until dusk, often returning mud splattered or dust covered from the range. He spoke little during meals but watched them often, particularly when Emma chattered about her day's adventures. Sometimes Lillian caught a shadow of something like longing in his eyes when he observed them together. A week after their arrival, Lillian was hanging laundry when she heard Emma's delighted laughter from the corral. Heart racing, she abandoned the wash basket and rushed toward the sound, only to stop short at the sight before her. Garrett sat atop the corral fence, Emma securely in front of him, while he pointed out features of a gentle brown mare in the enclosure. "She's called Daisy," he was explaining. "Because she's sweet as a flower, can I pet her?" Emma asked. "That's why we're here." He whistled softly and the mare approached. "Hold your hand flat with the apple like I showed you." Emma extended her small hand, palm flat with a slice of apple. Daisy delicately took the offering, her soft muzzle tickling the child's palm and causing another burst of giggles. "Mr. Garrett, you were right. Her nose is velvet." The transformation in Garrett's face as he smiled at Emma's delight struck Lillian powerfully. The usual stoic mask disappeared, replaced by genuine warmth that crinkled the corners of his eyes and softened his strong features. She must have made some sound, for he looked up, the smile fading slightly when he saw her. "Mama, look, I'm feeding Daisy," Emma called. Lillian approached the corral. "I see that. Are you being careful like Mr. Jameson says?" "Yes, madam. Flat hand so fingers don't look like carrots," Emma recited seriously. Garrett's smile returned, if more restrained. "She's a natural with horses, good instincts." "Thank you for showing her," Lillian said, "but perhaps next time ask me first." "My heart nearly stopped when I couldn't find her." "My apologies," he said, looking genuinely contrite. "I should have thought of that." Later that evening, after Emma was asleep, Lillian sat mending one of Garrett's shirts on the cabin's small porch. The night was warm, stars brilliant above the pines. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up to find Garrett crossing from the main house, a book in hand. "Evening," he said, stopping at the porch steps. "Thought the little one might like a story tomorrow. Found this in the attic, used to be mine." He held out a well-loved copy of Jack and the Beanstalk with colorful illustrations. "That's very thoughtful," Lillian said, taking the book. "She loves stories," he nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say more. "Finally, you've made a difference here. Place feels like home again." The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you, it's a fine home. I meant to ask the garden's doing well." "Do you need anything for it? Seeds or tools? Some tomato stakes would help, and perhaps chicken wire to keep rabbits out of the lettuce." "I'll have them brought up tomorrow." He glanced at the shirt she was mending. "You don't need to work evenings, the days are long enough." "I don't mind," she said. "It's peaceful out here." He looked up at the star-filled sky. "Used to sit out most evenings with my father. He knew all the constellations, taught me their stories. Would you show me sometime?" The question slipped out before she could consider its propriety. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of understanding, perhaps, or something deeper. "I'd like that," he said quietly, then cleared his throat. "Well, good night, Mrs. Harrow. Good night, Mr. Jameson." As she watched him walk back to the main house, Lillian realized with a start that for the first time since Thomas died, she was thinking of a future beyond mere survival. Summer ripened into August, bringing long, hot days and brief, violent thunderstorms that rolled through the valley like divine tantrums. The ranch thrived under Garrett's management, and the house bloomed under Lillian's care. After a month of her cooking, the men joked that they'd all grown fat, though in truth the hard work of ranching prevented any such outcome. Emma became a fixture around the ranch, beloved by the hands who taught her to collect eggs without disturbing the hens, and to identify different wildflowers. Garrett had fashioned her a small wooden stool so she could reach the water pump, claiming it was her official job to water the kitchen herbs Lillian had planted in clay pots along the windowsill. One evening, as a spectacular sunset painted the western sky, Garrett invited them to join him on the main house porch. He'd set up 3 chairs, the middle one smaller, clearly meant for Emma. "Best view in the territory," he explained, offering Lillian lemonade. They sat in companionable silence as the sun descended behind distant mountains, setting fire to clouds and turning the landscape golden. Emma, unaccustomed to sitting still, lasted only 15 minutes before spotting a toad near the porch steps and abandoning her chair to investigate. "She reminds me of myself at that age," Garrett said, watching her. "Always more interested in critters than sitting proper." "You've been very patient with her," Lillian observed. "Most men wouldn't tolerate a child underfoot." Garrett sipped his lemonade. "Children should be allowed to be children. My father believed that, even when others thought boys should be working as soon as they could walk. You were fortunate in your parents." "I was," he hesitated. "Your husband, he was good to you both." "Yes," Lillian answered honestly. "Thomas was kind and hardworking, perhaps too ambitious with the farm, but he wanted to build something for Emma's future." Garrett nodded, seemingly relieved by her answer. "The auction," he said suddenly. "I've wondered what brought you to such circumstances." Lillian tensed but realized she owed him the truth. "After Thomas died and the bank took our farm, I tried finding work in Carson City. No one would hire a woman with a small child. We traveled to Silver Creek because I'd heard of a dress shop needing seamstresses." She twisted her hands in her lap. "The shop had closed. Our money ran out at the boarding house. The sheriff suggested indentured service to clear the debt. And they separated you from your daughter." His voice held controlled anger. "They claimed it was standard practice. Emma being so young, they thought she'd fetch more sold to a family wanting a child." Tears threatened at the memory. "I begged them not to." Garrett's hand moved as if to reach for hers, then retreated. "Thompson is not known for his kindness to women in his employ." When I heard what was happening, he trailed off, jaw tight. "Why did you do it?" Lillian asked the question that had lingered for weeks. "Spend so much money on strangers." He looked at Emma, now happily examining her toad under the fading light. "My mother was 12 when her parents died of fever. No relatives claimed her. She was auctioned as a housemaid to a mining camp. The things she endured," he broke off. "A passing cattle driver heard her screams one night and intervened, brought her here to my grandparents. They raised her as their daughter." Understanding dawned. "So you were repaying an old debt." "Perhaps." His green eyes found hers. "Or perhaps I couldn't bear seeing that child torn from her mother when I had the means to prevent it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a deepening of trust, an acknowledgement of shared values. As darkness fell, Garrett pointed out constellations as promised, his deep voice spinning the ancient myths while Emma, tired from her exploration, curled in Lillian's lap. When Emma's eyes grew heavy, Lillian rose to carry her back to their cabin. "Let me," Garrett offered, carefully lifting the drowsy child. As they walked the short distance to the cabin, Emma's head on his shoulder, Lillian felt a dangerous warmth growing in her chest, something beyond gratitude, something she wasn't ready to name. At the cabin door, Garrett gently transferred Emma to her arms. "Sleep well," he said, his voice low. "You too," Lillian replied, suddenly aware of how close they stood in the darkness. For a breath, neither moved. Then Garrett stepped back, tipping his hat before disappearing into the night. Autumn arrived with brisk mornings and golden afternoons. Lillian's garden yielded a bountiful harvest, keeping her busy canning tomatoes, pickling cucumbers, and preserving peaches from the small orchard behind the house. Emma started helping more, proud to be trusted with sorting beans and carrying small baskets of berries. One Sunday after church in Silver Creek, Garrett surprised them by stopping the wagon at the general store. "Need to pick up a few things," he said casually. Inside, while he discussed an order of fencing with the proprietor, He nodded toward the dry goods section. Mrs. Harrow, why don't you select some fabric? Winter's coming, and you both could use warmer clothes. Lillian hesitated. Mr. Jameson, that's very generous, but consider it part of your wages, he interrupted. Can't have my housekeeper freezing when snow flies. While Lillian examined fabrics, Emma discovered the small display of toys. She stood transfixed before a porcelain doll with painted face and real hair, not touching, just staring with longing. She's pretty, Garrett said, coming to stand beside the child. The prettiest, Emma agreed solemnly. But Mama says dolls are for birthdays and Christmas. When is your birthday? October 15th, Emma answered promptly. I'll be 5 years old. Garrett nodded seriously. That's very grown up. Later, as they loaded their purchases, warm flannel, wool for stockings, new boots for Emma's growing feet, Lillian noticed Garrett speaking privately with the store owner, who nodded and made a note in his ledger. She wondered about it, but didn't ask. Life at the ranch settled into a pleasant rhythm that felt increasingly like permanence. Garrett began taking his evening meals at the table rather than retiring immediately to his study. Sometimes he even lingered afterward, listening to Emma's stories or discussing ranch matters with Lillian, whose practical suggestions he often implemented. October brought the first frost and the cattle drive to lower pastures. For 3 days, the ranch was eerily quiet with most hands gone. Garrett returned each evening exhausted, but took time to tell Emma about the day's adventures, the wayward calf they'd rescued, the eagle they'd spotted, the campfire songs the men had sung. On the eve of Emma's birthday, Lillian was preparing a special dinner when Garrett entered the kitchen carrying a large parcel wrapped in brown paper. For tomorrow, he said, placing it on the work table. If you approve. Curious, Lillian unwrapped it to find the porcelain doll Emma had admired, along with a small wooden cradle crafted from polished pine. Garrett, she breathed, using his first name without thinking. She'll be overjoyed. The cradle's my doing, he admitted. Made it evenings this past week. Lillian ran her fingers over the smooth wood, noticing the careful craftsmanship. It's beautiful, you're very skilled. My father taught me, said a man should know how to build things that last. He hesitated. There's something else. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch and handed it to her. Inside, Lillian found a silver locket on a delicate chain. For Emma, he explained quickly. Thought she might like something pretty, being a young lady's birthday. Lillian opened the locket to find it empty. It's lovely, but far too expensive a gift. It was my mother's, Garrett said. She'd want a little girl to have it, especially one who loves horses and toads equally. The personal nature of the gift and heirloom struck Lillian deeply. Are you certain? I am. His eyes held hers steadily. You both deserve beautiful things. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken feelings. Finally, Lillian nodded. Thank you, she'll treasure it always. Emma's birthday dawned clear and crisp. She woke to special pancakes topped with preserved strawberries and squealed with delight at the doll and cradle. When Garrett fastened the silver locket around her neck, she threw her small arms around him in an impulsive hug that momentarily stunned him before he gently returned the embrace. That evening, Walter and the other senior hands joined them for birthday cake. Emma, center of attention, blossomed under their affectionate teasing and gifts of candy and a tiny whittled wooden horse. As Lillian tucked her exhausted daughter into bed that night, Emma clutched her new doll close. This was the best birthday ever, she declared sleepily. It certainly was, sweetheart. Mama, Emma's voice grew serious despite her tiredness. Can we stay here forever? With Mr. Garrett, the question pierced Lillian's heart. We'll stay as long as Mr. Jameson needs a housekeeper. But he needs us, Emma insisted. He was lonely before, I heard Walter say so. Hush now, sleep, Lillian said, kissing her forehead and extinguishing the lamp. Outside under a canopy of stars, she found Garrett on the porch of the main house, smoking a pipe. He rose when he saw her approach. She's asleep, he asked, soundly, clutching her doll and wearing the locket. He smiled at that. Good, Garrett, she began hesitantly. Your generosity today was overwhelming. It brought me joy, he said simply, seeing her happiness. Still, they were expensive gifts, and where she stopped herself from saying just employees. Something flickered in his expression. Is that how you see yourselves, as just my housekeeper and her child? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. What would you have us be? Lillian asked softly. Garrett set his pipe aside and took a step closer. In these months, this house has become a home again. When you and Emma are here, everything feels right. He drew a deep breath. I find myself thinking of you both first thing each morning and last thing at night. Lillian's heart quickened. Garrett, I don't expect anything, he hurried to add. I know you're still grieving Thomas. I know Emma needs time, but I wanted you to know that you both have a permanent place here regardless of anything else. And if anything else were possible. Lillian whispered. Someday, their eyes met in the starlight, and Lillian saw in his the same longing she felt growing in her own heart. Then I would be the happiest man in the territory, he answered honestly. Impulsively, Lillian reached for his hand. His fingers entwined with hers, warm and strong. Someday may be sooner than you think, she admitted, her voice barely audible above the night sounds. Garrett's free hand gently touched her cheek. I can wait, he promised, as long as needed. But as their faces drew closer, neither seemed inclined to wait any longer for their first kiss. Winter descended on Pine Creek Ranch with heavy snows that transformed the landscape into a crystalline wonderland. The cattle huddled in sheltered valleys, while ranch activities turned to indoor work, repairing tack, maintaining tools, planning spring planting. The main house became a sanctuary of warmth against the frigid world outside. Lillian's cooking filled it with mouth-watering aromas, while Emma's laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent too long. In the evenings, they gathered in the parlor where Garrett read aloud from his favorite books, while Lillian sewed and Emma played with her doll, now named Clara. Christmas approached with mounting excitement from Emma, who had never experienced a proper ranch Christmas. Garrett and the hands dragged in an enormous pine tree for the parlor, and Lillian taught Emma to string cranberries and popcorn for garlands. They made ornaments from pine cones dipped in wax and hung paper snowflakes from the mantels. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, Garrett joined them at the cabin for a special dinner. Afterward, they exchanged simple gifts: hand-knit scarves from Lillian, a carved wooden jewelry box for Emma, and a leather-bound journal for Garrett. His gifts to them were equally thoughtful: a set of watercolors for Emma and a fine woolen shawl for Lillian. But it was his final gift, presented after Emma had fallen asleep by the fire, that changed everything. I have one more, he said, reaching into his pocket. The small wooden box he placed in Lillian's palm contained a gold ring with a modest diamond flanked by tiny sapphires. It was my grandmother's, he explained, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. The woman who took in my mother and gave her a home. Lillian's heart thundered in her chest as she looked from the ring to his earnest face. I love you, Lillian, Garrett said simply. I love Emma as if she were my own. I want to be a family officially, permanently. Tears welled in Lillian's eyes. Are you certain? A widow with a child, the widow and child who brought life back to this ranch, who brought life back to me. He took her hands in his. I never expected to find love again after Caroline died, Lillian started. Caroline, my wife, he explained. She died in childbirth 6 years ago, our son with her. Understanding bloomed. His empathy for her situation, his immediate bond with Emma, it all made sense now. You never spoke of her. The pain was too fresh for many years. His thumbs traced circles on her palms. Until you and Emma came, I thought that part of me was dead. You proved it wasn't. Lillian's tears fell freely now. Oh, Garrett, we love you too. Emma adores you, and I have tried not to, knowing I was just your housekeeper, but my heart wouldn't listen. Never just a housekeeper, he murmured, drawing her close. From the moment I saw you on that auction block, refusing to be separated from your child, I admired your courage. Everything since has only deepened that feeling into love. Their kiss was tender, filled with promise and shared understanding of loss overcome and joy rediscovered. "Is that a yes?" Garrett asked when they finally parted. "Yes," Lillian laughed through her tears. "1,000 times yes." Emma's reaction the next morning when they told her was pure joy. She launched herself at Garrett, who caught her easily, swinging her around the cabin. "Does this mean you'll be my papa for real?" she asked. "If you'll have me," he answered seriously, "and we'll live in the big house." "All of us together," Garrett confirmed. Emma thought for a moment. "Can Clara come too?" Garrett laughed, the sound rich and full. "Clara, the Toad collection, and anything else you treasure." They were married New Year's Day in the parlor of the main house, with Emma as flower girl, Walter as best man, and Reverend Matthews officiating. The ranch hands and townspeople who attended commented that they'd never seen Garrett Jameson smile so much, nor had they seen a more radiant bride than Lillian. As spring returned to Pine Creek Ranch, bringing new calves and fresh green, Lillian stood on the porch watching Garrett teach Emma to ride Daisy properly, his patient instructions and her delighted giggles carrying on the breeze. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, where their shared child had just begun to grow. She thought back to that terrible day on the auction block, when all hope seemed lost. How could she have imagined then that being sold alongside her child would lead to this happiness? That a quiet, determined cowboy would not only keep them together, but make them a family. Emma waved excitedly from atop Daisy. "Mama, look, I'm riding by myself. I see you, sweetheart." Lillian called back, catching Garrett's eye over their daughter's head, for Emma was truly their daughter now, the adoption papers signed last month. Garrett winked at her, his love evident even at a distance. That night, as they lay together in their bedroom, Lillian finally shared her secret. Garrett's face transformed with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her stomach. "Another child," he whispered. "Our child." "Emma's brother or sister," Lillian agreed. "A child who will never know auction blocks or separation, only love." "I promise you that," Garrett vowed, kissing her deeply. "All of you, safe and together, always." As winter snow gave way to wildflowers, Lillian often reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From desperation to prosperity, from grief to joy, from auction block to marriage bed, a path she could never have foreseen. In September, when their son Gabriel was born, with his father's green eyes and his mother's determination, the circle felt complete. Emma, now 6 and fiercely protective of her baby brother, declared them the most perfect family in all of Montana Territory. Looking around at her handsome husband, her 2 beautiful children, and the home they'd built together, Lillian couldn't help but agree.